Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle Dracula podcast, the Kung Fu and Vampires episode brought to you by AlexVanHelsing.com, where we talk about horror, vampire movies, and anything else cool that we can shoehorn into that arena. Today we're talking about Kung Fu, vampires, and the amazing, amazing movie, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, starring Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, teaming up with Kung Fu star David Chang. Now bear in mind that if you haven't seen this movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of Alex Van Helsing, Voice of the Undead, which comes out from HarperCollins July 26, 2011. So get this, that's right around the corner, so now is the time to order at Amazon or your local store. So order, send me a note when you do. With me are Drew Edwards, the creator of the long-running horror parody comic Halloween Man, which you can find at halloweenman.com. Drew?
Hammer time.
Tony Salvaggio, writer of comics like Psy-comm from Tokyopop and Clockworks from Humanoids. Hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Also, he's with Deserts of Mars, of course, an awesome band. And attorney Julia Guzman, who, with any luck, will provide us with mockery and a much-needed female perspective. Hello.
Token female checking in.
Yes. Okay. This movie came out in 1974, and as usual, I will spare people a blow-by-blow synopsis. Here's the gist of the movie. I tried to get this down. In 1804, Transylvania, an evil Taoist monk visits Dracula to ask for help reviving the great seven golden vampires, a race of powerful vampire lords. Trapped for some reason in his castle, Dracula realizes he can escape by taking on the form of the monk, so Dracula himself returns to China in the monk's guise. And we flash forward 100 years later, where Professor Van Helsing, Peter Cushing, is giving a lecture at Chungking University on Chinese vampire legends. And nobody listens to him. And after a lecture, a student, David Chang, informs him that the legend is true, and he knows the location of the village because it's his village. He then asks Professor Van Helsing if he would be willing to travel there and destroy the vampire menace. Van Helsing agrees and embarks with his son Leland, David Chang, and his 7 kung fu-trained siblings on a dangerous journey funded by a wealthy young widow played by Norwegian model Julia Guzman. On the long journey into the wilds of China, they are terrorized by bandits, vampires, and hopping zombies. And when Van Helsing and his party realize that the 7 golden vampires wreaking havoc on the village are actually acting under the guidance of Count Dracula himself, it's Van Helsing who finally has to defeat Dracula alone in a battle that is not nearly as cool as you would expect that would be. There's more, but I'd like to just get into it. So, guys, I want to hear first impressions, and I'd like to start with Tony because, Tony, I know you're the biggest Kung Fu fan I've ever encountered in my life, and go. First impressions, Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
I think it's awesome. It's definitely like, while I don't think it's as Kung Fu definitely as like Mr. Vampire and that whole series, right. The fact that it's a Hammer version of that is really awesome, and the fact that Hammer said, hey, let's get in on this Kung Fu thing is pretty awesome, because it's got a traditional Dracula in this one as well as crazy Kung Fu vampires, which is cool. And it is weird, but it is pretty awesome. Maybe not as awesome as it could be. I'd like to see maybe, I don't know, like there could be more of everything, Kung Fu and everything, but as it stands, I really enjoy it, and every time I watch it, I enjoy it just as much. So it never gets old for me.
Very cool, and I agree with everything you say, and we're going to get into it. Julia, first impressions, Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, from the perspective of, I take it you had not seen this movie before.
Actually, you know what? You made me see it like many years ago.
I think I had there too, because she remembered.
Sorry?
She remembered. I think we watched it over at you guys' place, maybe.
Probably, yeah. I remember there was a group involved. So Jason was like, "Okay, everybody, we're coming over and watching this awesome movie." But yeah, I agree with Tony that it is. It's pretty cool to see whenever you see that the kind of the East meets West movie, and you get a little bit of both, and it's kind of fun. I'm wondering if this, maybe Tony can say if the parkour, the phenomenon that they have going now here, it comes from the Kung Fu tradition of like, because it seems like they incorporate not just kung fu, but they incorporate like climbing up the walls and jumping over things and whatever in all of these.
You mean when David Chang just sort of Spider-Man's up the wall there at to sneak into Van Helsing's?
Yeah, but it seems like they do a lot of that stuff in those movies. But yeah, they did it in this one, and I was thinking, oh, that's kind of like parkour.
Yeah, I think it's kung fu. People watching kung fu movies and boredom started parkour.
Yeah,
and like it went with, hey, I bet I can do this, you know, and then it continued from there.
Mhm. So yeah, I liked it. That was fun.
Very cool. Drew?
Oh, well, I probably watched this movie more for the horror aspects and the kung fu aspects. I like this movie quite a bit. However, off and on I think it's going to sound like I don't like it as much as I do. I feel like in many ways it's a good movie. It's relentlessly entertaining. But it's also kind of disappointing, especially compared to the Hammer. I love Hammer. I mean, I think that's the one thing that you, me, and Tony all kind of share, this mutual love of Hammer horror. And I feel like compared to the Hammer movies from like the 50s and 60s, or even some of the other ones from the 70s, this is definitely a lesser entry. And I have to say, I'm really turned off by the fact that Dracula is not Christopher Lee. Like that bugs me every time I watch it. It just, for some reason, it just pisses me off.
That's amazing.
But it's a fun movie. It's everything you guys say. It's absolutely fun to watch. And I have to say, you know, despite the sort of weird style of the makeup, I think the golden vampires themselves are possibly among the coolest looking monsters that Hammer ever rolled out. They're just so cool looking. That's what I got.
They are really, really, you know, they're iconic. They're very strange. I mean, they're not like any other kind of vampire that we've seen, but they're definitely iconic.
They almost look like an Asian version of the Karloff incarnation of the Mummy. To me,
yeah.
I mean, they look mummies
like that.
Yeah, Jason was wondering about. He was saying that, you know, I don't understand why they look like they've partly what do you call it? Not deteriorated. What's the word for when you die and you start to decompose?
Yes.
Why they look like they've partially decomposed? And I didn't have an answer for that.
They are truly
like
ghouls.
Charisma compared to like a Hammer, you know, vampire. They're definitely they're just gross. And they really don't like it, despite that they're a band together. They really don't even seem to care about each other. They just kind of do. Hey, we have this ritual thing we do.
Yeah, it's more like zombie. It's kind of like they're more like zombies, really, in the way that they behave.
Chinese vampires in Chinese folklore, and I'm sure that's something we're going to get into, are a bit more like zombies than what we think of as like your cape and cloak, you know, Dracula type vampire.
Right.
But yet they incorporated the Dracula vampire as how he always is. So that's what was interesting, is they didn't decide we're going to pick one and go with either the way they do it in the East.
Well, there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
There's actually, and I'll give my first impression as well, but to jump right into that, there is originally. So this movie has a very, very strange, weird production history. It is clearly a Chinese production. However, it has a British director, and this is all because
Roy
this
Baker,
big.
who also did a Marilyn Monroe movie back in the 50s. Don't Bother to
Which
Knock.
Marilyn Monroe movie did he do?
Don't Bother to Knock. It's her one and only sort of horror / thriller role.
I like Baker a lot. I like him. He made Scars of Dracula, which is a movie that everybody hates, but I really love, and you know, I enjoy his work. He's the best of the late Hammer guys. He made Vampire Lovers, another movie that I just love.
I love Vampire Lovers. I like it quite a bit more than.
But he's not an action director, and part of me wishes that they had found a kung fu director maybe to direct this, and then maybe had somebody else do the acting stuff. But the fact that there is a European Hammer-style Dracula, what went down here was that this is a Shaw Brothers picture, right? They actually, I think they asked for Hammer to write a treatment or even a full script, and so it was going to be kind of everything with the Mad Monk in China. This is the British guys talking, and they turn it in, and the Shaw Brothers say, "No, wait a minute. No. We want to see the Cape. we want Dracula." So they have this sort of donut at the beginning and the end where this guy, John Forbes Robinson, I think his name is, comes in as Dracula. It is absolutely not Christopher Lee. You're right that, huh?
Complete with the whole Nosferatu, getting up out of the coffin in that straight as a board way where they just rise up, which I don't get why they're able to always do that, but that was like, kind of a little homage there to the traditional.
What I love is not only is he Dracula, but he's got a huge D. Like, he's not Vlad the Impaler. He is Dracula with an embossed D, larger than life on his coffin. Like, in case you didn't know, this is where I am.
Yeah.
Well, I can give you some historical tidbit there, and that is that Dracula himself, Vlad, actually did sign many of his letters D.
Wow.
Because that was his nickname. It was his sort of handle in the world he ran. He
loud and proud with that in this movie.
Yeah, but yes, I always loved the fetishism that Hammer brought to Dracula, where things, he wears a ring and it says D, and he's got the giant D. I mean, he's not selling that house because somebody would have to get rid of all the D's everywhere.
Right.
He's like Trump in that way. But this guy playing Dracula, you know what? Let's not get into that just yet. First impressions. Okay, this is one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. It's not crazy in the way that a really awesome new kung fu movie is, where there's stuff happening every time and it's always surprising you. And in fact, as far as that goes, it's a little bit disappointing. If you're hoping for like great 80s Jackie Chan, this is more old school and not even as cool as a lot of the old school as far as the kung fu goes. And it's also, because of all the kung fu stuff, it's not quite as creepy, odd, and cool as Hammer horror. It's a weird mix of the two, but I'm just so glad that it exists. I mean, it's got the seven brothers and one sister, and I don't know why she gets left out all the time because she is cool with her little Psy. I want dolls of those guys. I totally want a Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires playset with like a little Van Helsing and like the seven brothers and the one sister and like a little Dracula and maybe a little pit with like blood that goes into it. I think that would be cool. And in fact, now I'm thinking I'm just going to make this out of a whole bunch of Barbie dolls. And
you can Van Helsing's son, you can just replace with a rock or any other inanimate object.
No, that's not true. He held his
own.
own. He actually got in there and pulled some punches.
Maybe for the end.
Shot a gun.
Maybe
yeah.
Elderly Peter Cushing's more of a badass than him.
No, but you know what, Peter Cushing, talk about at the end. Peter Cushing takes a good long time to get up off his ass. I mean, at first,
he's actually got like a torch, he's doing cool stuff. I'll stand by.
Well, no, but that was at the very end. But the son is like, fighting, and he's just sitting there with his torch, and then finally the son has to like push a vampire into the torch for him to be able to jump into the action.
I don't know, man. Every time the Seven Brothers go get in a kung fu fight, like Van Helsing's kid kind of like he starts to walk over towards it and then he stops and he's like,
yeah.
I don't
he's like, I'm old. What am I thinking? I am too old for this.
I really, when we watched this, when we watched it in a group in Austin a couple of years ago, we watched this back to back with Brides of Dracula, which was very cool because you got to see Peter Cushing in '62, still quite spry, however old he was in 1962, and that has the big action scene where Peter Cushing not only cauterizes a vampire wound on his own neck by holding on to some chains so that he doesn't fall as he like burns himself with hot iron, but then he like does this whole thing where he leaps onto a windmill and grabs onto it and forms the giant image of a cross using the rising sun to like destroy the vampire that's caught in the crosshairs of this giant windmill. I mean, so if we assume this is that Van Helsing, he has, and the timing for him works about right. So he's now gotten on in years, and he has a son. And I'm gonna go with Drew here. I do not picture Leland Van Helsing, doing what Peter Cushing did just like 15 years earlier, jumping up on a table and leaping and grabbing curtains and tearing them down, and then, all that stuff. I don't see this guy doing any of that. I think the apple has kind of fallen far from the tree. I don't know what it's going to take to whip Leland into shape, but he does.
Gun, his gun skills are even useless. It's like, man, how ineffective can you be overall? And the answer is you can be Leland.
I don't know. I think you guys aren't giving him nearly enough credit. I think he really got some good action shots in there. Just because he's not a badass kung fu star guy,
He does take a couple of American style punches.
Nobody even asked him to do kung fu. He doesn't do anything he's supposed to do well, except stand off in the distance and occasionally shoot a pistol, which sometimes hits.
I don't know. I thought he did. I thought he did a lot.
Make-Way likes him, so
Make-Way, yeah, he's like, he kind of gets in there to help out his girlfriend, and whatever.
Exactly. That's what Leland is good at. Like, hey, you guys fight. Oh, I'll protect you. Well, I'm better at fighting than you.
I'll go do the dishes with Make-Way.
Like,
I'm gonna go wash the dishes. By the way, why does she have to wash the dishes when she's like just as good a fighter as the guys are, but then she ends up doing all the dishes? I was thinking she's really truly the modern woman where we all have we decided that we can do whatever men can do and we should be allowed to do whatever men can do, but we still are going to do all the housework. That just drove me crazy.
Maybe she's the only one. Maybe she's the only one who wants to do the dishes.
Maybe she's the only one who ate. Maybe nobody else ate anything, and she just
maybe none of the others care if the dishes are dirty, and so this is just her.
That was one thing that all the women in the movie, except the ones who were getting their clothes ripped off randomly in the raid, all the women in the movie are kind of like that. Like, hey, I'm tough. Hey, but it's cool to fall in love. Like, it was a real weird dichotomy where it's like, still kind of has some of the, European chauvinist machismo, but then, but everybody gives awesome speeches and they kick butt. And so it was a real, watching it, I was really curious. I was actually really curious what your take on it was, Julia, because it's strange, because on the one hand, everybody's, the European girl, she's like, hey, I don't need
Vanessa.
any help. Yeah, and then she's like, I don't need any help. And then she kind of does. It's like it never really figures out. They're like, yeah, but,
Yeah, she never does, and she does not have skills the way Make-Way does. She has
skills,
money.
But she's definitely not delicate either. I mean, she definitely wants she likes the danger. She's attracted to the whole idea of the adventure. So she's out there, and I mean, she's not all whiny and, it's hot. And, I mean, but you're right that she doesn't have the mad skills, but she's not.
I thought it was cool that she eventually sort of has, it's 1974 when they're making this movie. Peter Cushing is in a really cool
hair.
period.
Unabashedly has the 1974 hair.
She's gotten hot. Because they're walking through the desert. And so she eventually is down, her hair is down and it's sort of feathered Farrah style, and she's wearing what I guess is a white tank top. I don't even know, somebody is going to have to tell me if they had tank tops in 1904. I don't know.
Sort of
if they did,
I can prototype Laura Croft.
Yeah, exactly. If they did have the tank tops, they were not supposed to be walking around in them with nothing else on top. That's for sure. I mean, it was definitely highly inappropriate for her to be wearing that, small amount of clothes.
I wish we could do what comic books do, where every few years you take a story that's already been told and you retell it again and you tweak certain bits of it so that you keep the parts that you like and you fix other things. Because I think, the young generation characters on the European half of this film are not. I don't think they're fleshed out quite enough. I don't really completely get Julia, although I get her a lot better than Leland. There's a lot of great opportunity for there to be some kind of character business between Leland and Van Helsing, and we never get, is Leland really sick of hearing people go on about how awesome his dad is?
Well, I think so.
I think
so. I think we got a hint of that when Vanessa was all, that's your dad. Your dad's the that Van Helsing. Whoa, that's awesome. And he's kind of like,
your dad's the guy who could jump on a windmill and kill vampires with it.
I know. He's kind of like, well, I'm cool too. I mean, why are you so fascinated about why does everybody have to talk about my dad all the time? The beginning scene when he's kind of trying to hit on her.
That's right.
He just needs to add, look, he's old.
Exactly.
Look how old he is. He's not cool like me.
I mean, in theory, you could rewrite this and have Leland go through a transformation where...
Are you calling for a remake, Jason?
Oh, I'm absolutely. I mean, hell, I could remake this. I mean, I couldn't make it. I could write this, in a minute, you could write this. I think either of us would bring more to the script than whoever they get if they actually remake Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Okay, so did I even finish first impressions? I don't even know. We're long past that. I want to throw out something just to back up a little bit and give some context here. Richard Nixon went to China. The result was the great opening, where all of a sudden we were going to be, for the first time, talking to the Chinese and trading with them and dealing with them for a long time. The first time in a long, long time. And there were going to be all of these big co-developed businesses. This movie, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, is one of the vanguard of that. It may be the first giant, well, it's not giant, but the first, professionally mounted, professionally released East-West amalgam. And that, so it's odd to me that I'm such a huge Hammer freak that it's odd to me that this movie, that a Hammer movie sort of occupies that interesting little historical place. But that also is why it's so weird. I'm not at all surprised that Christopher Lee didn't do this. And the reason why is Christopher Lee was done the year before with, Satanic Rites of Dracula, which I like. That's another movie that you could completely remake because the idea is a lot cooler than the way that it comes out. But he was done, not ever going to do this again, never. And so, it would have been nice to see him in there. If he could do Count Dooku with the awesome action there, it would have been great to see him in this.
But you're talking about as Dracula, because Dracula's only in it for 5 seconds, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway.
Well, yeah, but first of all, Dracula could be in it longer. For instance, the battle scene at the end. I hate to jump. We'll jump around. Okay, the battle scene at the end lasts like 5 minutes, and in fact, it's kind of an accident. It's like it's an afterthought. Like we don't have stuntmen. We're going to just do something that these two 60-something actors.
Well, and if we're going to jump to that scene, let's talk about the fact that scene is idiotic. I mean, the guys, why on earth did everybody leave, and then they leave Van Helsing behind, and then he doesn't come right out after them, but they don't ever come back for him. So he's just fighting Dracula by himself. And by the way, manages to stab him within minutes of.
Yes.
There was nothing. That scene was really. I felt like just left me empty because I just felt like he should have. It should have been a lot harder to kill Dracula. Dracula should not be that easy to kill. And also, where did all his friends go? I mean, they just left, and they were like, okay, I guess he's staying around at the, creepy dungeon place or whatever. I don't know.
I think that, and there could have been more with the Taoist guy,
Yes.
They fighting I don't know. I mean, as far as remakes go, it would have been cool to see the monk fight the kung fu guys and do some kung fu stuff, and then change into Dracula, and all of a sudden Van Helsing has to step in because Dracula is more powerful than kung fu, you would think. But
I would like to propose,
he's not that powerful.
I would like to propose that we call him Cocula or Dracucaw because it's like Caw and Dracula as one person.
Well, Cocula's a totally different movie, and you won't find that on Netflix.
My general impression, whether it's accurate or not, it's just when I'm watching this movie and every time I watch this, it's just Christopher Lee is such a badass. It takes two people to fill his shoes.
Yes.
Basically, have two actors playing Dracula.
I love the flamboyance of the priest Ka, when he's going, and we will revive the 7 golden vampires, and he does this whole like with his sleeves, which reminds me, this whole thing is you're looking at a Chinese riff on a Hammer movie. It starts out the Chinese guy is the Chinese monk is moving through the mountains of quote unquote Transylvania, and he stops by a quaint little Christian shrine. And Julie and I looks at one another like, what is that? I don't recall. I don't know. Somebody yet another thing somebody will have to let me know. Do the Eastern Orthodox guys ever have slightly Buddhist style little
nativities posted on posts?
Little nativity scenes just posted. That struck me as something that they would kind of figure we would do, even though we don't do that. And then you get to
because if you'll notice, they as they're traveling, you see like the Buddhist version of that, right?
Right.
Yes.
And so if you'll notice, when he notices that, he kind of looks at it like, oh look, they do this too.
Right.
Like,
except for that we don't.
And
that's
then
the funny part.
Later on when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Except, we may or may not. I don't know. I've never been to that area, but it's kind of a neat,
it is.
look into it. And plus, both times they're kind of not as affected. Van Helsing says a couple of times, well, we have the cross, but then these vampires will be affected by, Buddhist symbols.
The image of the Lord Buddha. Oh, well, when that one 7 golden vampires, and I want to get to what the heck the 7 golden vampires are, but the point where they lose one 7 golden vampire early on because they're all out raiding, and they're chasing after the farmer guy, and one of them tries to get his little medallion back, and he touches the Buddha, and it sets him off like a sparkler, and he's down. And at that point, we've got 6. In the words of my friend Incher, we've got six golden vampires at that point. So let's review.
By the way, I love the fact that the other golden vampires all kind of look on and go, "Wow, man, that sucks for you." They don't try to do anything. They're like, "Oh man, that's terrible. Look at that."
They're not total zombies. That's what.
This kind of you too can prevent Buddha fires.
Ooh, I am so glad I didn't touch that. That is terrible.
That is funny. That's why they're not zombies. They are something weird. They're kind of mummies. They do not speak. One presumes that they're so mummified that their jaws don't work. They seem to be able to bite by sort of distending their lips so they can bite you.
And then
they can be fast.
Of zombies. Then there's the army of the hopping zombies that are skipping along the street going, "We're off to see the farmer." They're down.
Oh, those guys are awesome. I love it.
But usually it's the vampires that hop.
Yeah.
Because a friend of mine from China, I was asking him well, why do they hop? And he's like, well, it's part of the thing, but also it's kind of like they're really supposed to be flying, but there's no real good way other than wire work to kind of make them fly around.
Yeah, and we saw how well that works with the rubber bats that are flying around.
I love the rubber bats. I have such affinity for the rubber bats and for the Chinese version of the castle where everything is this awesome green and red and all of these really crazy colors. I love all that stuff.
But the reason they hop as well or fly and they're all stiff is because they do have rigor mortis. So they're actually, maybe that's why they made these vampires kind of decayed. It's because Chinese vampires actually are kind of decayed somewhat.
Are they? And they, like I said, they do appear to be intelligent, like you pointed out. When the one touches the Buddha and he catches on fire, the others kind of look at one another. They do not seem to be concerned. The relationship between the 7 golden vampires is unclear to me. I don't know what word I'm looking for. The cosmological significance of the 7 golden vampires is a complete mystery to me. I don't quite understand why they are what they are. what purpose they're supposed to serve, who they're supposed to answer to, why there are 7 golden vampires, why, whether they're supposed to be trying to take over China or do anything. I'm not mocking them.
Why do they seem to be made of like air, so that when they
get
killed, they just deflate?
Their awesome bat medallion seems to actually hold the air inside of them.
Yeah.
So, or at least smoke, because they don't die if that happens. They're just sort of leaking, and so they have to get it back, I guess, so he can plug that up again.
They just mostly seem to, like, hang out with each other with, like, writhing naked chicks and bleed them. I mean, it's
yes.
They don't have a plan.
Presumably, they're gathering up the blood for Lord Dracula. So it could be, by the way, that Lord Dracula has greatly retarded the powers of the 7 golden vampires. Because when Ka comes back, he goes, I want to revive the 7 golden vampires. I get the impression that they ruled this place, but 100 years later, Dracula's in charge, and the 7 golden vampires are basically just his thugs.
Well, and since when does Dracula have the ability to just put himself in other people? Is that something that ever happens anywhere else, where he just kind of goes, I'm going to be taking over your body now so I can get the hell out of here and run around China or whatever?
Well, doesn't that happen at the end of Taste the Blood of Dracula? I could have sworn that
there's another movie where that happens, but it is kind of an off-brand, not really what you would associate with Dracula normally. But I mean, there's been so many weird. I mean, hell, he feels more of like an official Dracula than the Blade 3 Dracula, where he turns into the Predator periodically.
Yeah. Oh, God! Yes. Once again, I would much rather watch this movie than Van Helsing, by the way. But and I apologize.
This to me is like sort of is sort of the 1970s equivalent of Van Helsing, though.
I guess you're right. You're totally right. You're totally right to call me out. That this is essentially, this is certainly, yeah. No, you're right. I just kind of
Well, even right down to Tony, when we were discussing Van Helsing, he said one of his issues with Van Helsing is that there's a lot that's good about it, and that just makes the bad stuff that much more disappointing. And that's sort of how I feel about the movie. But
yes.
I will add to that. Ultimately, I do find it to be a redeemable film, but I do find it to be a disappointing one in many ways.
Well, also, by the way, on the Dracula thing, like they do collect. They have the whole ritual blood thing before Dracula is like even something that is a factor, because the guy goes to rescue. The farmer guy goes to rescue his daughter. So they've been doing that ritual thing for a while now. Why they did do that, and then other times they're like, well, we'll just suck your blood here in the village while we're doing this. I mean, mainly, the raids are so that you can have, 70s TNA and fulfill that, like, check.
Isn't that vaguely disturbing? I know that this is going to sound just so like, I don't know, tray sensitive of me, but I don't get the titillation. You're just tearing women's tops off, while they're screaming and stuff.
In this context of this movie, you mean? Because I know you get it in other movies, but in this movie, you're like, well.
Yes, I have on DVD Emmanuel Meets Dracula, and yes, but this is not Emmanuel Meets Dracula.
No, see, I was calling it 7 Brides for 7 Vampires in that one scene, because they have all the girls, all in a row, or whatever, in a circle.
Nice. No, but that happens in 70s kung fu movies. In fact, there's one. I want to say it's Snake Fist Ninja, but I'm not positive. There was one where, no, it's not Snake Fist Ninja, but
you can even tell me it was Snake Fist Ninja, and I swear to God I would believe you.
The lead bad guy, he threatens this girl, and he goes, if you do not tell me where she is, I will rip your clothes off one by one until you are naked. And she's like, ah! And then the next scene, he's obviously kind of done that because she's holding her clothes, running, and I guess I don't know if I've ever seen it uncut. One assumes that, maybe there's more, maybe there's not, but evidently that's just when you're a bad guy, that's just what you do in ancient China, like, and blouse off, take that. Oh man, that guy's so bad. He comes. Not only does he rape and pillage, but before he does that, he rips their blouses off. and
Yes.
ruins their clothes. I mean, that actually is a pretty bad villain thing. Like, add insult to injury before I do really bad things.
It was so gratuitous, though. In this movie, it was so gratuitous because even there's that one woman where they're, like, going into the village and the woman runs out, and it's like she can't even figure out how to put her hands over her breast. She's just, like, flailing uncontrollably as she tries to cover herself. And I was like, that's insane.
If you're in the right frame of mind or you're young enough, I bet it's still awesome, though.
Yeah.
You're like,
what were you saying,
what movie
Drew?
I saw, and then you're like,
it's also gratuitously violent.
It is gratuitously violent.
That's true, man. They used
I love it.
They used a lot of red Caro syrup in that movie. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the guys getting slashed with the swords, and they all do the same sort of 70s trick where they apply, the effect happens while they're turned around. So they turn around and they've got a big gash and they go down. And we see that same shot like a whole bunch of times in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the violence is, I mean, man, at the end, the vampires, they're rough. Like, you get the idea these kung fu guys are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I like it, too, because there is, like, somewhat of a story arc, because he's like, look, I mean, he tells them in the cave, like, hey, I don't think we can do this again.
But see, I didn't like that, Tony, because let me tell you what I thought about that, is that they had just had a scene in which they defeated every single zombie or whatever they were, and they didn't have a scratch on them. They had kicked major ass, and then he comes out of it going, I think if we do this again, we're all going to die. And I'm like, why? You guys just totally were 100% victorious with no casualties or injuries of any kind. And then but it's like he's almost like he's predicting into the future that they're going to die, but there was no evidence of it here. And then Van Helsing gives them all this speech about, well, we just have to be prepared next time. And guess what? Next time is when they all get themselves killed. I'm like, where did the preparation come in? I mean, that just apparently went straight out the window.
Well, there's two things. A, they almost didn't escape because they got, like, all the zombies got called away before they just got overwhelmed.
That's right.
The second time they're actually fighting, like, they're fighting all the zombies and all the vampires.
Yeah,
like, you get the impression like, now the stakes are really high. Now I was surprised that just
I like that you used the word stakes there.
They do kind of have the little A-team preparation scene where they're all doing the pit.
Oh, thank God for that. You're right. That's true.
Where they're doing what?
Where like, making pits.
They're carving up the big, they're creating that wall of stakes, the pit. They're doing, they're carving up stakes. They're doing all kinds of cool stuff in preparation, and I love that. I love seeing, I'm a sucker for that very cliched scene where everybody's sort of getting ready for the big battle. I realized something here, having watched movies like this, is that movies like this have kind of screwed me up for, like, explaining vampire stuff to people who don't watch things like this. Because, like, when I was doing Alex Van Helsing, Vampire Rising, right? And I hate to, like, mention one of my own books, but this is an example of how out of touch Jason is. I just threw in stuff where the vampires control zombies. I was like, they got zombies. And I remember people reading it, editors, and then later some readers going, what is the deal with suddenly having zombies here? Isn't that a totally different tradition? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've seen lots of movies where vampires control zombies. To me, it's obvious, but I realize it's because of stuff like this, that not everybody has seen, where you just have,
It's the movie.
Ahead,
it's the movie nerd shorthand. It's just how, like, instinctively that if there's a vampire and a werewolf in a movie, 99% of the time they're going to be against each other.
Right.
Like,
that's true.
Those two don't get along, except in Monster Squad for whatever reason. Well, actually, no, that's not 100%. The Wolfman works for Dracula, but the sort of Larry Talbot character is working against Dracula. So I guess that's kind of happening. Anyway, I'm on a tangent.
You're talking about just so I understand, because I haven't seen it actually. You're talking about the new Monster Squad, right? You're not talking about the 1970s one with.
No, it's like
the TV show. No. I'm talking about the Monster Squad film from the 80s.
Yeah,
I missed that.
Hard.
We're gonna have to watch that because I did not see that.
You've never seen that?
Oh man.
No, I've never seen the Monster Squad.
Dude, you got to get on that.
I know.
Awesome.
Okay, so what else should we mention here?
One thing I did really like as far as the vampire, like there's several things I did like about this Dracula, even though I totally agree with Drew that he's not as good as some other ones. I like his weird, crazy cloak transformation when he transforms back into Dracula at the end. It's such a weird, like it's got like a eye, and like it's so strange. It's such a weird effect. Like I kind of want to see more of it because it was out of the blue, and then it just looks so crazy and bizarre and cool. And then
I really love the sort of manga-ization of Dracula that goes on here.
Also,
you're right.
For once, he actually, like, all of them, and you see this rarely, he actually blesses all of the vampires and himself to the devil. Like, he's like, by the way, just so you know, again, vampires are evil and we worship the devil. Like, straight up blesses, like, all of them, like, out of the blue. Like, which, again, and that's European because, I mean, remind
me of this. I'm not remembering this moment. Tell me which movie you're talking about.
He's going to send them all out, and then he's like, and Dark Lord, we worship you, blah, blah, blah. He's got this whole thing.
Right, when he's Dracula.
Like calling out the devil for all of them, which kind of probably is weird to the Eastern vampires because they're like, the devil? Like, I don't know. Satan? Oh, that's your thing, man.
Well, they got demons. They're probably who knows? Who knows how this script was actually translated in the Chinese version? By the way,
I thought that was kind of bizarre, and like you don't see that. You kind of see that sometimes, but there's very few films that adhere to that. Which is kind of part of the whole deal, though. And like Western vampires is there's a some occult force that's behind it all, right?
Well, I mean, Hammer's previous vampire movie before this was The Satanic Rites of Dracula. It was actually called The Satanic Rites of Dracula.
I feel like the Hammer Dracula films in general, and they're just their entire vampire series did really play up the satanic aspects of vampire mythology, way more so than the Universal vampire.
Oh, for real? Yeah, absolutely.
I like that also he really, really, really chooses scenery when he's dying. He's like, this is drama. This is acting.
That guy is so awesome.
And at the beginning, too, the whole business of when he's going to transform into Cos body, whatever, and then he's saying like, well, he first Jason, we have to talk about how when we first started watching it it's just playing out, and then Dracula pops out of the coffin.
And then Dracula opens his mouth, and the line is supposed to be, "Who dares disturb the sanctity of Dracula?" And instead he says, Julia, what did he say?
I don't speak Italian, but it was Italian. He was like, he suddenly starts speaking Italian. And we're like, what?
And I was like, no!
It's really funny.
This is the Italian bootleg. My bootlegger lied to me.
But that was like a super dramatic line. And then he has, even as Cocula, as I'm calling him, he has the line where he goes, what is it now? I'm trying to find if I wrote it down. But it's he's talking about himself in the third person, and he says something like, beneath the image, the immortal power of Dracula. Like he's talking as he's walking out all by himself. I thought it was so great. I was like, I'm so cool. I talk about myself in the third person.
I kind of wish he'd ridden into battle on like one of the horses along with him. That would have been kind of cool.
Absolutely. There's so much more. God bless what you could do with like a big budget version of The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, where we also tweak the script a little bit for just to make sure all the arcs connect, and then you've got a satisfying story for everybody. But I am always happy with Dr. Doom Dracula, always.
Yeah.
Because like that reminds me of Dr. Doom, how he would just make speeches about himself, and he always had like little robot transcribers who would say, please record that last soliloquy of mine so I can listen to it later. I found it particularly inspiring.
Yeah. Oh, what's also awesome though is when they're about to fight at the end, and it's like high noon at a Western, except it's high midnight, I guess, right?
Yes.
So they're all prepared, and there's dust blowing, and like everything. It's totally like a spaghetti western, except vampires and kung fu are going to come about, and that's pretty cool. I really like that aspect. 'Cause, I mean, they're like it's set up exactly like that, except it's midnight instead. You know.
Well, even when they have it, then there's also the daylight scene where they're trying to find the cave or whatever, and Vanessa says maybe they've forgotten their way, and I'm thinking the family's sitting right there going, "Hello, we're right here. We can hear you."
Yes.
We have not forgotten our way of how to get to the tavern.
God, these people are so insufferable. I mean, I love the fact that the family is so giving. I guess because they're happy.
They're such servants. I mean, the way that even when they save Leland and Vanessa's lives, and then they immediately take over carrying the what do you call the carriages? The rickshaws,
yep.
Yeah. They take over carrying the rickshaws, and we're like, what? Shouldn't you guys be in the rickshaws since you're the ones who saved their lives?
Yeah. Oh, I noticed that too. There's so many times when they're like, just this side of, saying something really like racist. You get the impression like in any other movie they would say something, and you're like, where's this going? But
Mei-Kuei is my sister. It would be her pleasure to attend you.
It would be a pleasure to attend you. And at first we were kind of offended by that, but then I was thinking, if you're asking somebody to come and save your village, you're probably going to want to do whatever it takes. And this woman's going to pay like thousands and thousands of dollars to fund the expedition. You're probably going to want to do whatever you can to make them comfortable. So I kind of thought, I guess it's okay, but yeah.
Van Helsing does snub all the Chinese. They're like, they don't listen to me, stupid Chinese, like more or less. Whoa, what? I mean, I understand him being kind of bitter, but I forgot what the line was, but he definitely it's a snub. Also, it's funny to me that with all the legends that are in China and just all the rich kind of history, like vampires are right out. They're like, we have all these other legends, but when you're talking about vampires, Western guy.
I thought that was kind of a really cool sort of even pro-Chinese bit of business there at the beginning. It was intended to show, that the Chinese regard themselves as being the pinnacle of cultural forward thinking, and so they're like, it is 1904. Why are you talking to us about these things that would only impress villagers in Eastern Europe, or whatever? Yeah, and gosh, I wish people who only know Peter Cushing from Star Wars could see him in this stuff, because it's always so interesting to see what he brings to these roles.
Oh yeah.
Actually, so in fact, we should probably turn to final thoughts and then endorsements. So, who wants to throw out the first final thought? And I'll pick somebody. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I still really like it. I like that it's also definitely, the choreography is very Shaw Brothers choreography, and it has a certain style. Even through its flaws, like, I'm entertained every time I watch it. And I do wish that, I hate to say, like, this could be improved, people could do it better, but there's enough flaws where you're like, man, it could have been so much even more awesome,
Yes.
That it's kind of one of those things. But I'm always entertained, and I never regret watching it, I don't watch it as much as maybe other kung fu movies, like rewatch, but it's tons of fun. It's got Peter Cushing, being Van Helsing in China. That's always awesome. All the brothers and sister just rock in the way that Shaw Brothers kung fu heroes do, and they each have their stick. They're like a super team. That's awesome too. Very kung fu movie, but I like it. I'd say everybody who needs to see like cool crossovers like this, because it works even despite its flaws.
That's exactly the word I was going to use, is crossover, because to me, I'm a sucker for anything that combines, the tradition of one culture and another culture, or the tradition of one style, genre of movie and another one, so that the people, that's what I love. Yeah, crossover is exactly the right word, because the people who are in the one genre are getting exposed to the other ones, kind of like a primer to kung fu for Hammer horror people, or like an idiot's guide or whatever kind of thing. So I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad it exists.
Yeah. Drew?
Well, I would say that, again, I enjoy this movie. It's not a movie I would recommend to people that are not either already like hardcore martial arts movies fans or hardcore horror movie fans. I feel like a casual viewer of either of those genres or just like a random movie goer would probably find this movie very weird and almost disorienting. But it's a movie that I go back to and watch every so often. Very entertaining, and if you're a Hammer horror fan and you haven't seen it yet, absolutely track it down.
I just want to say that to me, the moment when they fight when they fight the bandits for the first time, when David Chang and his family come out with their kung fu skills, and we see them sort of line up on the hills against the coming bandits, and the archer like sprints off, into the deep background so that he can shoot from there, and they all sort of, and the sister like puts out her sai. That is, to me, it is so memorable that that I think is a great moment, a truly great moment, and it makes me thrilled. The rest of the movie doesn't at all live up to that, but there are a lot of movies actually that I enjoy where there's only one good moment. So as far as that goes, I agree with you completely. This would be disorienting and weird for somebody who's not really into vampire movies or kung fu movies, but anybody listening to this, huh?
And yet I liked it.
And yet you liked it.
Neither of those.
Well, I think. Well, I guess you have an appreciation for the weird. I mean, and I can attest to that. I was actually referring to myself for what it's worth. But I would recommend this to anybody who is into vampires and is into like modern kung fu and wants to see an interesting variation. And I really love watching it just as a means of thinking about how you could do it differently. So I definitely would say, check this out if you can find the DVD. So endorsements.
And by the way, people should, if possible, watch Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires and not Seven Brothers Meets Dracula. That's
correct.
Yeah, which has been cut by 20 minutes, which is weird because that makes it, about an hour?
I don't remember how that works. It doesn't make any sense. To be perfectly honest with you, I've seen the version called Seven Brothers Meet Dracula, and it is, it takes this movie, which already has some logical problems, and makes it just almost incomprehensible.
Right.
And you're right, it's about an hour or whatever it is. So at that point, the movie is essentially just a music video without music. And,
right. So make sure don't fall for the imposter if you're going to watch the movie. You will be disappointed and maybe disoriented and probably just sad. So
I got one other thing to say, actually, and I think Drew will totally agree with me on this. This is the period for big, weird Hammer experimentation. Where you've got Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, you got Vampire Circus. Gosh, what an awesome, Well,
they were trying to reinvent themselves.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and so this does fit into that strange, period where Hammer was just trying all kinds of crazy things, and this is one, and we probably should watch Vampire Circus, honestly.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Oh yeah.
So after Twilight, I think we're going to have to do Twilight so that people can find out what in the world we would make of Twilight, or not. We'll talk about that. So endorsements. What do you got, Drew? Go ahead.
Well, from the makers of trash like Dracula 2000 and Jason X comes Drive Angry, starring Nicolas Cage as an undead felon who has escaped from hell to save his granddaughter from devil-worshipping rednecks. It features gratuitous nudity, gratuitous violence, and lots of muscle cars. God bless Nicolas Cage, and God bless Hot Rod. Rent Drive Angry on DVD.
Wow, that was actually almost a Nicolas Cage impression, I gotta say. That was
Cage.
I think you were possessed by the spirit of Nicolas Cage.
Oh man,
I should only be so lucky.
If you're gonna plug vampires and Nicolas Cage, then you got to plug Vampire's Kiss too, because that is one awesome movie.
that would be a movie to do down the line too.
So, all right, Tony, do you have anything to endorse?
Oh yeah, it looks like it's getting distributed. Everyone needs to see Attack the Block because it's awesome. It's super great. Like, it doesn't stray very far from traditional kind of alien invasion and people have to fight back stuff, but you get the impression you've kind of seen it before maybe, but everything it does so well. It just stuck with me, and I almost got to see it again this week, and I'm really sad I didn't, because it is awesome. Like, you really, if it plays anywhere near you, make a pilgrimage, go see this movie. It's, the best, like, kid thugs versus aliens movie you'll see. Oh, and to combine horror with kung fu on Netflix streaming, Donnie Yen's Legend of the Fist: Return of Chen Zhen is out, and you can stream it, and it's awesome. I tell people that so much ass is beat in that movie that it breaks the ass beatometer, because that's what it does. It's awesome. I really enjoy that movie. And it starts with Chinese guys kung fu fighting Germans in World War I, and then just goes.
No way.
So, yes, if you're a kung fu fan, you must see this movie. And also, if you're a horror fan, you should see Attack the Block, like, no doubt.
All right, outstanding. Julia, do you have anything that you'd like to endorse?
No, just Alex Van Helsing, the book, The Voice of the Undead, which comes out next week. Woo! Right. No, I've got.
Oh my gosh. Well, actually, other than that, I was totally going to suggest Vampire Circus. I was actually going to reserve my thing to do literally log rolling because yes, for the love of God, Alex Van Helsing, Voice of the Undead, comes out next week. So I would be an idiot not to promote that right now. If you go to alexvanhelsing.com, you can actually read inside, and if you have your own blog, you should go to that link and grab the code and put the read inside on your own blog and pre-order. Now's the time. Okay. Well, this is great. What an outstanding conversation. I really appreciate you guys being on. I'm really happy that this one went off, and we should be up tomorrow for people to be able to download it. So thank you all. HalloweenMen.com for Drew's comic, his new 4-part series, and No Safe Word is the current issue. And Tony, you can find at desertsofmars.com. And it is desertsofmars.com, right?
Correct, yes.
Yes, desertsofmars.com. Not Desserts of Mars, but deserts.
Oh, that's totally different.
Yes. And although you should probably get that URL just for...
Well, we can sell like red velvet.
Totally.
Very thick,
totally.
Very rich, heavy.
Like that urban legend about the red velvet cake.
Yeah. Rich, heavy, riff-based cupcakes.
It's red velvet cake, people.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, that's Silent Green. Never mind.
And and mine is alexvanhelsing.com. And I hope you guys will be back next time, and I will announce soon after we all put our heads together what the next episode will be. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Night.
Bye.